Okay, James Madison was our fourth president. Think back, father of the Constitution. He became the fourth president. He served from 1809 to 1817. He was elected in 1808 and he took the oath of office in 1809. Now, going on in the world at this time, the British were impressing American sailors at sea, which meant they were hopping onto American ships, taking American sailors, and forcing them to join the British Navy. Can you imagine how we really felt about that here at home? So, as Madison got elected, there are these quote unquote war hawks, John C. Calhoun and Henry Clay, who were calling on the government to declare war with Great Britain. So on June 18th, 1812, so Madison held out for 3 years, the U.S. declared war on Great Britain. The, the British were interfering with our neutral shipping rights, so we were allowed to trade with anybody. We are our own country. We're no longer Britain's colonies. But Britain didn't like that, so we were getting attacked or blockaded by the British ships. They were also impressing the American sailors, again, taking the American sailors, making them join the British Navy. And there's also British interference with westward expansion. They're hanging out in America and they're saying, no, this is our land. You can't move here. Our land. So, causes of the War of 1812. You've got the British interference in American shipping and western expansion. Madison, who was a Democratic Republican, just like Jefferson, declared war. The Federalists were opposed to Madison's war resolution. They threatened secession and they proposed constitutional amendments that were not acted upon, which we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. Now, the War of 1812, we were really, really unprepared. Remember that Jefferson cut back our Army and our Navy? Well, that came back to bite us in the butt. We had a very small Army and Navy. We also tried to attack Canada, which is where Great Britain was, but we failed. And the Canadian and British forces captured Detroit and some western forts. So we weren't doing so hot in the beginning. Um, Now, remember when I said the Federalists were annoyed with us? They decided to call the Hartford Convention, which was a meeting between 22 delegates from the 5 northern states that the impact of the war was killing their economic interests. They discussed seceding from the U.S., which means leaving the U.S. as states and making their own country, and also amending the Constitution. It highlighted sectional tension, and the Federalist Party was labeled traitors because of this action and was seriously hurt politically. So this was the start of the end of the Federalist Party. But you really start to see sectional differences within the United States that we will see later that help influence the Civil War. In summer of 1814, the British invaded the Chesapeake region and burned a lot of towns along the Atlantic coast, including the Capitol, the White House, and other federal buildings, which was revenge for our burning of their Canadian capital of York. Also, at this time, when they were burning Washington, they continued marching up to Baltimore, and the national anthem was written by Francis Scott Key. He was out on a prisoner ship in the middle of Baltimore Harbor, and as the battle raged on, he wrote this song, "Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light." That's beginning of day. gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. He woke up in the morning and saw that the flag was still flying, even through all of the smoke and all of the rubble. So the war officially ended in 1815. The Battle of New Orleans took place after the war ended, but American victory gave Americans a sense of victory in the war and established Jackson as a national figure, which Jackson will come back a little bit later on in the century. So it was officially ended in February with the Treaty of Ghent. It stopped all the fighting. It said nothing about the impressment of sailors and neutral shipping rights, and it returned all the lands taken during the war. Now, it sounds like we did really well in this, but at the same time, the war was a draw. Nobody won it. It was considered an even, everybody just stopped fighting. But Americans stood up to Britain for the second time, and we survived, so we felt a stronger sense of nationalism. So it at least helped our morale. We expanded following the war, so we produced an American claim to the Oregon Territory, which was owned by Britain at the time. And we also had increased movement of Americans into Florida. So that was good. We felt like we could start moving west. The next president, the fifth president, was James Monroe. He was elected in 1816. This is the time known as the era of good feelings. It's following the War of 1812, and it was a happy time in the United States. We were expanding. We felt pretty good. We beat down Britain again. Monroe was part of this Virginia dynasty. 4 of the first 5 presidents were from Virginia: Washington, Jefferson, Madison, and Monroe. In total, I believe Virginia has had 9 presidents come out of it. I think that's a pretty good record for us. So, the American system, Henry Clay. He was Secretary of Treasury. He was trying to unite the American economy. So he decided to recharter the National Bank, which restarted up, reinvigorated it. Then he also wanted to establish a protective tariff. So a tariff, again, is a tax that's placed on imports that makes foreign goods more expensive. The New England states said, heck yes, we like it. We make more money. It makes us sell more goods. And then the southern and western states said, wait a minute, goods are more expensive. So you're already seeing more sectional tensions because remember, New England is manufacturing. The south and west, at this point, they're largely agricultural. So they have to export a lot and then import a lot of manufactured goods. So they're like, wait a minute, this is costing us more money than we thought it would. And also investing in internal improvements, fixing roads and canals and stuff like that. So focus on building up the United States as it is. The Adams-Onis Treaty in 1819, that gave us Spain, or that gave us Florida from Spain in 1819. Helped us out quite a bit. It also gave us a good firm boundary between the Louisiana Purchase and Spanish possessions in the North American continent. So the Monroe Doctrine in 1823, it's our first foreign policy officially. Nations in the Western Hemisphere were inherently different from those of Europe, so that means we're just formed differently. We are republics by nature rather than monarchies. So, because of this, the American continents should not be considered for future colonization by any European powers. Basically, Monroe drew a line down the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and said, keep the heck out of here. The U.S. decided it would regard as a threat to its own peace and safety any attempt by European powers to impose their system on any independent state in the Western Hemisphere. So, if any European country tried to come over and stake its claim and make its own country in North or South America, the U.S. said, we see that as a threat to our safety, we will attack. So, this political cartoon where it draws a fence around North America and South America is actually pretty accurate. And it also said that the U.S. would stay out of European affairs, where we're like, we don't want to get involved. So this continues Washington's don't get into foreign affairs, stay neutral, avoid entangling alliances, all that stuff, and we keep to ourselves. This stayed through World War One. I mean, we had a fence, a big giant wall down the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So it warns Europe against us, basically.